So, welcome back to Margot Bell Designs. Today we are looking at appliqué. Appliqué being the French word for apply. So what we're going to do is put a shape onto a t-shirt. First you're going to have to create a pattern piece or a template with which you're going to use this to cut out your fabric. Yes, it can be a little bit time consuming, but it's going to save you a lot of time in the long run. And you can always refer back to that template for the next time. You'll need to use some iron-on Vilene for your pattern piece, whatever shape you're going to applique. You can see here the shiny side is the iron-on side and the dull side is the side that you want up so that you're actually putting the iron on that. So we've got the shiny side here. Work out the size of the shape that you need, and it's best to fuse it first, okay? So we'll need to chop this up and fuse it. Just when you're fusing on your ironing board, be aware that this glue will stick to your ironing board, okay? So we're going to chop it up and fuse it, and then we can cut out our pattern piece, okay? Now what a good idea is to cut that one up, fuse it, turn it over, and then turn our letter or number over, and then we can mark that in pen, okay? Because if we were going to mark that in a chalk or a pen on the top here, which is hard to see when we've got our pattern, you don't want any red pen or big black marks, because when we're going to applique, we're not necessarily going to hide that with our stitching, okay? So when you do fuse it on, turn it over and turn your number or your letter over, and then you can mark it in pen and cut it out. Position your newly cut out shape or letter onto the t-shirt exactly where you want it, and then we're going to pin it into place. But bear in mind, you want the pins to go in the middle of the letter where you're not going to be sewing anywhere close to the pins. Change your stitch width over to the widest it will go, or whatever width you'd like your zigzag to be. We're going to work on the widest today. And then go down to your length, and we're going to go to probably about in between 0 and 1, so a halfway mark. This smaller stitch length is so that we get a very close zigzag, very tight together, which is commonly known as a satin stitch or a specific to applique stitch. You may need to change your settings if you have a computerized machine over to a satin stitch as such, which is the widest width you can go, and then just a very tight stitch length so that they're very close together. You can use a wooden embroidery hoop if you wanted to, which can keep your fabric stable as you're stitching your letter or your number onto your t-shirt. The only problem is that this can lead to stretching in that area, and it may not revert back to the original shape that it was. Depends on the quality of your t-shirt. We're not going to use one today because it's such a small child's t-shirt. It's a really good idea to sample your satin stitch on a scrap piece of fabric before you actually go into the real thing, because you wouldn't want to start on it and not have the right spacing on your satin stitch. Sometimes if you hold onto the fabric or have more control of it, you get a better stitch. So I'll just show you what I mean. So at the start where I was holding onto it, it's a much tighter stitch, whereas this one where I was just letting it go through the machine on its own, it's much looser, which ideally we'd like it really satiny like this. So I might just go a little bit tighter on my stitch length and try it again. Sometimes you have to fiddle around a bit to get everything right, and then once you're ready to go, you're full steam ahead. That looks much better, but it's quite close. Work your way around the outside edges of your applique shape first. Now I've just done an additional little swatch that I wanted to add in here to explain what we do when we get to the corners, because you don't want to just come down to this corner and then turn around and not complete a neat looking satin stitch in your corner. So if you sew right down to the end, position your needle back into that corner, so when we spin it around, my zigzag is right to the edge again. Okay, you just need to think about it when you're going around. Excuse the puppy in the background. Sometimes it gets a bit thick and it holds, so you just need to ease it through your machine. Same goes for when we come to a point. You need to think about it. What are we going to do here? Are we going to go right to the end of the point? We're going to cut the point off. No, we're going to go around and then a little bit further. One more stitch. I can come down a little bit straight over that edge to square it off, and then back around the other side. Just ease it through. At the end of my satin stitch, I revert back to my straight stitch and move the needle to one side so that I can do a firm back tack that's going to hold my stitch in place. Alright, so there we have it. So you just need to think about it. So we came down straight to the edge and then we turned around and then we kept going straight and then we've covered that total point and then the same at the other side. It's just a much neater finish rather than just working your way around a piece, okay? You just need to think about it as you go around. Of course, you need to do all the sides of your shape, including any inside edges. Okay, I'm really spoiling you here. I'm giving you some extra tips on how to put a frill on to the end of your t-shirt. So I've cut this about 10 centimetres wide. I've used it selvage to selvage and I've stitched it together, and then we're going to overlock both sides because it might fray. Then we need to change our settings to a gathering stitch, and we've learnt gathers in an earlier video. Do our 2 rows of gathering stitch. Make sure you keep an opening to the end. Now here you work out 4/4 of your frill so you can put it exactly onto the edge of your t-shirt, okay? Gather it in so you can see your pin will go to each side of your side seam and then again to the middle of your t-shirt and the centre back of your t-shirt. If you're really tricky, you can stitch over the exact same stitching line of your twin needling of your t-shirt. It's always good to allow a little bit extra for the stretch of the t-shirt. Don't have it too tight, otherwise when the garment's put on, it may crack, the stitching may crack. And of course we need to do a 2 centimetre hem. Then we need to press everything up, fold it up all beautiful, package it, and you may recognise this from our making our own designer cards. Put it all into the parcel, and of course you'll do your satin stitch applique for your card to match. Up next, we have sew your own sleep masks. See you next week. So enjoy!